first of all, how am I going to represent these words? Okay, I will have to come to a concept called word to vec, which I will discuss next class. Okay. So, right now I said words, but computers can handle only numbers, right? Computers can handle only a set of numbers, a vector of numbers or something, right? What does a word mean? How do I represent a word? How do I put it in a set of numbers, right? So, that is one question we will answer next class. But more importantly is the fact that we have something called vanishing gradient and exploding gradient problem. Okay, actually I had hoped this. Okay, so the idea of vanishing gradient and exploding gradient is how do we train a neural network? Remember I plotted some so let me go back to my this lecture, right. So, in a vanishing gradient, what is happening is there is a recurrent, right. So, it is going through many hoops, correct. So, when I am doing neural network learning, what do? I have some error, right, and then we do something called back propagation, right. So, what do? We adjust the new weight as the old weight plus, rather it is minus eta times delta E by delta W, right, where E is the error and this is the weight. And remember I had said if I plot weight and the error is, if it is only a single weight that I have to adjust and the error depends only on single weight, then we are trying to see some kind of a minima, right, and we are adjusting this by small steps by using this the learning rate is small. So, we will do some small increments and move the weight in a correct direction, right. So, when you are doing back propagation, what happens is I am going to look at the last and I am going to back propagate, right. So, the gradient is going to, there is going to be a chain rule, right. So, each of these guys are going to be influenced by what happened from the last. I am going to back propagate. So, there is a continued multiplication, and what happens is that at some point it might completely become small, that means the gradient will almost go to 0, right. That is called a vanishing gradient problem. This going to 0 means it vanished. So, there is the gradient is no longer there, it is going to 0. If it goes to 0, there is this whole term will go to 0 and therefore, the weight will never update, right. So, that is a problem 1, or it can become so big, it can keep growing that it will make the weight make big jumps, and we always want to do small jumps, because when you do a big jump, I might go from this point directly somewhere here, and then I will actually my weight might be increasing the error itself the way I am jumping, right. So, if I have some other thing like this, so when I make big jumps, I am actually, it is also not good thing to do, right. So, both the exploding gradient and the vanishing gradient are a big problems in a recurrent neural network, and one of the reasons why it happens is it's going through this hoop many times, and so it sort of becomes multiplicative, okay. And so, in a traditional recurrent neural network has this problem, and therefore, Schmidhuber, he is a professor in Germany, he came up with this idea along with the student of something called long short term memory. I am not going to go through this whole details, but basically instead of just having a simple linear combination W times X, a weight vector times input, and then applying a non-linearity like sigmoid or tan H. This is a little more complicated cell. It just does not take a linear combination and just applies a non-linearity. Instead, there are some operations that are used to forget, some operation which are important to carry the information and should not be forgotten. So, it should be carried along even when you go through 10 time steps or 20 time steps. So, these kinds of ideas are built into the cell, so that if it is not important, it will tend to forget, but if it is something that it has to be carried, then it will be put through this conveyor belt kind of thing, okay, cell state, and goes from one cell to another cell, okay, at one time instant to another time instant. So, this is actually a recurrent neural network, except just the simple non-linearity kind of operations are made more more instead of simple operation like this is much more sophisticated system that does not forget so easily, and so that basically you can even have long context and still it will carry that memory through. Okay. So, this is something called long short term memory. We are not going to go into the details. I will stop here. As I said, the next my interest will be how I said that I am going to learn this language model and learn how to do words and all this. How am I going to feed these words, right? How am I going to do all of this? We will see next class. How do I feed words into a computer, right? I have to represent it through some symbols, through some numbers, right? So, what are those numbers that I will use for different words, right? So, we will see something called word to vec that will come in. Okay, thank you.